Washington greatly exceeded expectations in year one under Kalen DeBoer. The Huskies went 11-2 with a bowl win over Texas to earn a top 10 finish. And now, nobody is sleeping on the Huskies. Washington is a legitimate Pac-12 title contender and college football playoff contender. And both of those things are something that I don't think any of us were expecting just 2 years ago. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, guys. We're so glad that you could join us today as we break down everything you need to know for this Washington football team heading in to 2023. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and of course, check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. Some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the country over there, beating out over 80% of the national analysts and handicappers each of the last 5 years. Check out our Patreon account as well. Exclusive college football content there year-round. Become a member of our Patreon Wall of Fame. And again, that content only going to be posted to Patreon. And also check out our mailing address. Send us some gear to be represented in every single Gridiron Expert video as we expand our GE Nation from coast to coast. And I'm telling you, we'd love to get some more West Coast representation, especially for this Huskies team that's going to be really, really dangerous in 2023. You take a look at them, guys. I love this team. I love this team so much. I love what Kalen DeBoer is doing with this team, and I love what Washington's going to be able to do this year. It all starts, of course, with their offense, right? That is, when you think of Washington, especially from last year, you're thinking of Michael Penix and the offense. One that averaged nearly 40 points per game last year, 516 yards per game, led the nation with 370 passing yards per game, and Penix is back. Heisman Trophy candidate heading into this year, threw for over 4,600 yards, 31 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions. He's dangerous, guys. As long as he can stay healthy. Had injury issues during his time at Indiana, reunited with his old offensive coordinator, Kalen DeBoer at Washington, was healthy last year, was phenomenal. If he stays healthy, they're going to be just fine. Because the beauty of it is, it's not just Michael Penix running the show. He is the centerpiece. He is the most important part. But you've got a running back in Cameron Davis, who had 13 touchdowns last year. You have all top 5 of your pass catchers returning from last season, including 2 1,000-yard receivers and Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan. Again, both having over 1,000 reception yards. This offense has a chance to be even better than it was in 2022. The defense wasn't nearly as bad as people think it was last year. 8 starters are back after giving up just 25.8 points per game. They were stingy against the run, only gave up 121 rushing yards per game. The secondary's got to improve a little bit, though, after giving up over 250 passing yards per game. But 5 of the top 7 tacklers are back for the Huskies. The defensive line is loaded this year. We'll be able to take advantage of teams with weaker offensive lines. We'll be able to dominate in the trenches, fix that secondary just a little bit, and the Huskies are going to be looking just fine. Take a look at their schedule, guys. It's favorable and not favorable. First half of the season, really favorable, but it's unfortunate because in those final 6 or 7 games, they have to play all of the elite Pac-12 contenders. They've got to play Oregon, they've got to play USC, they've got to play Utah, they've got to play Oregon State. I mean, it's really, really brutal, that last bit of the schedule there. And I mean, they didn't do Washington any favors. They didn't get to avoid any of the top dogs here. But the first part of the schedule is pretty favorable. Open up the year against Boise State at home. The Broncos, of course, not a slouch at all. Won 10 games last year. The Mountain West runner-up. Pretty solid defense as well. Andy Avalos, defensive-minded coach. But this is a Boise State team, that lost a lot of starters in their secondary. Being in Seattle now, facing this passing attack, I don't know if the Broncos are going to have enough to hang with Washington. I think it's close for about a half. The old Chris Peterson Bowl, by the way. Chris Peterson connection there. Not anymore, of course. But Washington should win comfortably over the Broncos to get to 1-0. They'll beat Tulsa to be 2-0. Then they go on the road to Michigan State. And, anytime you have to play a Power 5 opponent in the non-conference, you don't want to overlook them. I don't care how good they were last year, how bad they were last year. You can't afford to overlook them, especially now with this game being in East Lansing on the road. But I still like Washington a lot in this game over the Spartans. I think Washington actually wins it comfortably. Last year, when they beat Michigan State, the 11th ranked Spartans, they beat them by 11. That kind of put Washington on the map and said, whoa, Washington might be legit this year. Watch out. They beat Michigan State that bad. 39-28 didn't do it justice. The Huskies killed them in that game. But now, you look at this year, Michigan State doesn't have any good quarterbacks. They've got a major quarterback issue with Peyton Thorne transferring out just a few months ago. The defense wasn't all that great last year. The secondary improved a little bit from the worst in the country in 2021 to a little bit better in 22, but not going to be enough to slow down Michael Penix and this Huskies team, one that had 397 passing yards against Michigan State last year. So even though it's on the road, even though Michigan State would love to get a win over a top 10 team, it's just not going to happen. So Washington wins Their third game, they're 3-0, and I'll make them just jump ahead. We'll make them 5-0 heading into their bye week. I think they'll beat California. I think they'll beat Arizona. California is honestly the more tricky game here because the Golden Bears tend to play the Huskies relatively close for some reason. Last year, it was just a 28-21 win for Washington. The year before, 31-24 win for Washington. And then California actually pulling off big upsets over the Huskies in 2018 and 2019. So, the Golden Bears, a team that returns a lot of experience, 17 starters, could give Washington a run for their money, but the game in Seattle, I like Washington there. The game against Arizona, some would say is a trap game, especially with Arizona's offense. Jaden DeLora and that passing attack going to be really, really tough to stop. Again, Washington's secondary, kind of a weakness defensively, but Arizona's defense is their weakness as a whole, too. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you could see a bunch of fireworks back and forth, just like we saw last year with Washington winning over the Wildcats 49-39. But ultimately, which defense is going to come through clutch in the end? Which defense will get the most stops? Washington owns the significant defensive advantage. They will win in the desert right before their bye week, and they're 5-0. Then the schedule gets tough. This is what will determine whether or not Washington could make the Pac-12 championship, make the college football playoff, or if they're going to fall just short. Maybe make a New Year's Six bowl game, but not contending for a championship. All starts with that game on October 14th against Oregon. I mean, this is it. This is a huge game for both teams. Both teams will be in the running for a Pac-12 title. Both teams will be in the hunt for the college football playoff. This could almost be maybe an elimination game for both, depending on what's happened before and who the teams have to play after. Last year, though, Washington pulled off the massive 37-34 upset over Oregon. The Huskies were a 12.5-point underdog in Eugene and pulled off that win. Many will be quick to say, oh, it's because Bo Nix got hurt. It's because of this, because of that. No. Bo Nix did get hurt, and yeah, it may have played a slight role. But that Oregon defense didn't have an answer for Washington. They did not have an answer for Michael Penix and his offense to put up 522 yards of offense on Dan Lanning's defense. The Bo Nix didn't affect that, right? Washington deserved to win that game, and that kind of surged them back up in the rankings and helped lead to that top 10 finish. Now they get to host Oregon. If you look at the history of this rivalry, Oregon has really dominated the series against the Huskies for about the last 2 decades. Last year was a very rare win for Washington over the Ducks. I'm going to continue with the, rare theme here. I like Washington in this game a lot. Coming off a week of rest in Seattle with a better defense than they had last year, an offense that could be even better than they had last year, Washington is not the same team we've seen in years past. I think they have enough to take down Oregon. I genuinely believe that. I love the quarterback battle. Bo Nix versus Michael Penix. It's going to be a lot of points scored here, just like it was last year. But Oregon allowed 256 passing yards per game last year. Both defenses' secondary should improve a little bit, but I like Washington's passing attack a lot more. I like they have home field advantage. I think they get a win over the Ducks on October 14th. The Huskies are still undefeated. They're going to remain undefeated for the next 2 weeks. They'll beat Arizona State, a team that has a brand new coach now, Kenny Dillingham, and a revenge game for the Huskies as well. Keep in mind, they lost to the Sun Devils 45-38 last year. Ultimately, a game that we didn't know it at the time kept Washington out of the Pac-12 championship and maybe the college football playoff. Washington goes 10-2 in the regular season, guys. Their 2 losses to UCLA and Arizona State in back-to-back weeks. They shouldn't have lost the Sun Devils. That was a massive upset. They beat Arizona State. They're 11-1. They're going to the Pac-12 championship game. They beat USC. They go to the college football playoff. That Arizona State game really changed the course of the entire season, not just for the Pac-12, but the country. We just didn't really know it at the time. But now at home, with Arizona State really trying to rebuild here, Washington will take out their frustrations and revenge over the Sun Devils. They get a win there. They'll torch Stanford on October 28th, beat them 40-22 last year. Stanford, only 6 starters coming back as a whole new coach. It's going to be a rough year for the Cardinal. So just like that, they are 8-0 heading in to the final month of the season. They are more than likely should be a top 5 team in the country, at least top 6 or 7 in the country heading into the month of November, and it should set up a possible top 5 showdown at USC on November 4th. What a game. What a game this is going to be. This could be the first of 2 meetings between the Trojans and the Huskies. That's how good both these teams are, legitimate Pac-12 title contenders. Caleb Williams versus Michael Penix. A USC team that returns the majority of their pass-catching core. The same can be said for Washington. Washington, to me, in this game, owns the defensive edge. That shouldn't become us a surprise. USC's defense is atrocious. Lincoln Riley's defense has always have been atrocious. But to me, I think USC owns the edge in everything else. I like Lincoln Riley as a coach a little bit better than Kalen DeBoer. I like USC's offense a little bit better than Washington's. Factor in the game is at the Coliseum, and while USC fans don't always show up and show out for their teams at the Coliseum, this game should be packed. Packed, because it has major, major stakes. It's going to be an instant classic. It's a game that honestly, in a way, for me, is bigger for USC than it is for Washington, because the Trojans find themselves in a tricky spot. They'll play Notre Dame a little earlier in the year. Then they're going to play Oregon, I believe, the week after. It's kind of a tough spot for the Trojans. So Washington does have that going for them, but I think USC's offense is just a little too much. Home field advantage plays a big role. Washington takes their first loss of the year. They fall to the Trojans. They're 8-1. Still in the hunt for everything, though. Their hopes of the Pac-12 title, the hopes of the playoff are not done yet if they can win out. I do think they bounce back the next week and beat Utah. Key for this game is not being hungover. If Washington rallies, realizes that all their goals are still in front of them, and they aren't hungover after that heartbreaking loss to USC, they should beat Utah at home. Why? Because while Utah's defense is phenomenal, while they have 9 starters coming back and they're going to be one of the best defenses in the country, I don't know if the Utes can hang with Washington offensively. I think Washington's offense is good enough to exploit that Utah defense. I love Cam Rising. I love what he's doing. I hope he stays healthy. But I don't know if he can single-handedly lead the charge against this Washington team, keep them up step for step. Washington won't allow Utah to get the ground game going, which means Cam Rising is going to have to do it all by himself with a lot of wide receivers missing from last year. I just don't think Utah can do it away from Salt Lake City. So Washington gets a major bounce-back win over the Utes, 9-1, 2 games left. What's going to happen? Well, they go on the road to Oregon State, a team they beat 24-21 last year in Seattle. And it was a weird game, right? I mean, Oregon State was dominating that game for the majority of it, at least the first 3 quarters. And then Washington chipped away, found a way to battle back and win. Big win for the Huskies. This Oregon State team, in theory, is better this year than they were last year. A lot of returning talent offensively, quarterback upgrade with DJ Uiagalelei. And my concern is actually, believe it or not, the ground game. Washington's run defense was solid last year. We believe it's going to be solid against Utah. Can they do it against Oregon State in Corvallis? Senior night for the Beavers. A team that rushed for over 196 yards per game last year, a team that rushed for 175 yards against Washington last year, and a defense that's going to get better as the year goes on. Also, Corvallis, Oregon State's 12-1 there over the last 2 years. Jonathan Smith has made that a very difficult place to play. And I look at this, I feel like it's the prime trap game. Washington, maybe not getting ahead of themselves, but knowing the room for error is gone. If we're still in the playoff hunt, but we can't afford to lose, you're going into a very hostile environment against an Oregon State team that very well could have Pac-12 title aspirations of their own. I just don't think the Huskies get it done. They should have lost to the Beavers last year in Seattle. I don't think they're going to have enough to come on the road and win it in Corvallis now. That defense shuts down Michael Penix in the passing attack. They do a phenomenal job there. And I believe that Washington takes their second loss and is eliminated from college football playoff contention. Pac-12 title hopes still not dashed, depending on what Oregon does. USC does the rest of the year. Utah does the rest of the year. They'll own the tiebreaker, though, over Oregon and Utah if it comes to that. They wrap up the year at home against Washington State. Easy win over the Cougars. I love the Apple Cup. It's an underrated rivalry, but Washington has won 11 of the last 13 games against the Cougars. They won 51-33 last year with 703 yards of offense against this Jake Dickert defense. Now it's at home in Seattle. They want this win for another 10-win season. Could still be in the hunt for a Pac-12 title. They're not letting this game slip away from them. I think it's actually going to be about a similar margin, about a 20-point game, give or take, over the Cougars here. Washington wins that big and ends the year at 10-2 for the second year in a row. 2 years ago, if you had told a Washington fan they'd have back-to-back 10-win seasons, I think they'd be happy with that. This year, some would say 10-2 might be a disappointment. But you look at the 2 losses, at USC, at Oregon State. You can make the argument they win one of those. And if they do, Pac-12 title, they're in. They win that, college football playoff. This team is legit, guys. 10-2 might still be good enough to get them into that Pac-12 championship, but it probably won't be good enough to get into the playoff. But a New Year's Six bowl game in just the second year at the helm for Kalen DeBoer, that is nothing to frown about. That's nothing to be upset about. Washington football, guys, is back. Went through a little rough patch for a second, but they're back. They're elite. And they are not going to surprise anybody this year because everybody is going to have their eye on them. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and of course, check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com, our Patreon account for exclusive college football content year-round. Send us some gear at the mailing address down in the description to get represented in every single Gridiron Expert video. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.